Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the City of Farmers Branch regular study session meeting. It is Tuesday, January 19, 2021. The time is 2:36 p.m. Councilmember Driscoll, who is not present in the chambers, will be present via Zoom, a little under the weather, and out of an abundance of caution, decided to stay home today. But we'll start with A1, discuss regular agenda items. Councilmember Rotana.
None for me, thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Norwood.
No.
Councilmember Lynn.
I don't have anything.
Councilmember Baumgartner.
I don't have anything.
Councilmember Driscoll, anything on your end? No. Okay. All right, then we will jump to A2, which is receive a report from Rod Smith, Assistant Vice President of Planning and Development of Dallas Area Rapid Transit, DART, regarding agency's redesign of the bus system, upcoming opportunity for public input. Mr. Davis, I'll let you kick it off.
All right, looks like he's unmuted. Mayor, Council, Shane Davis, Director of Sustainability and Public Health. Introduced Rob Smith, who's with DART. Rob gave a presentation to Council a while back in terms of the bus system redesign. So he's here today to kind of give you an update on where the process is at, and also the public participation component that's coming out very shortly. So at this point in time, Rob, can you hear us? Are you on? You may be muted, Rob. No, he's unmuted. Rob, hang on just a second. We don't have you live. It shows him unmuted. Where's Jeff?
Kevin went upstairs. Kevin ran back upstairs to check the audio settings.
Okay.
Because it shows that Rob is unmuted. He
Yeah.
showed his camera. So Kevin was going to go back upstairs to check the audio settings.
Okay. I didn't know if he did start video, but I didn't think so.
No,
Usually not the case.
Right.
Should be good to go.
Okay.
We can hear you, Rob.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, and people in the audience. And I'm Rob Smith. I'm the interim VP of Service Planning for DART. I believe the last time I spoke to the council was right before the start of the pandemic, and we have continued to work on this project on the bus network redesign throughout the pandemic. And the next year is going to be very pivotal in moving forward on translating what we had started with into an actual plan and potential service changes. And so I'm going to give an update today on where we are, what we've done over the past 9 months or so, and where we expect to head for the rest of this year. And I can't see the slide presentation. Should I load that, or are you going to run it from there?
We'll run it from here, Rob. Just tell us next slide.
Okay, and if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, got it. And our goal is to complete the redesign effort this year and implement major bus service changes in January of next year. And during the presentation, I'll cover some of the key steps that we've taken along with the status of the current work. And I would like to start by thanking the City of Farmers Branch staff for their participation in the development of the plan concepts and the draft bus network plan, and I'll talk about a couple of the places where that participation has happened as we go through the presentation. Next slide, please. One of the key concepts that we have spent the past year trying to deal with, and a core part of this effort, is establishing the balance between ridership and coverage. Transit networks are usually a mix of routes that serve higher ridership areas and other routes that provide coverage and perhaps less ridership. Earlier in the process, we developed two conceptual bus networks that represent really a range or bookend of different approaches, a network aimed at high ridership and a different network aimed at high coverage. The final network that we end up developing will be a balance between those two concepts in all likelihood. Next slide. Since they're such an integral part of what we've been doing, I'll spend a moment to define each of these concepts. When we talk about ridership networks or ridership as a goal, we're trying to maximize ridership, and often that involves thinking like a business and choosing very selectively the markets that you enter. And generally, a ridership-oriented network will serve major corridors with a lot of activity, a lot of density. There will be a small number of routes or lines that run more frequently, and the service is very much focused in those areas where there's the highest ridership potential. As you can see on the map on the right, though, there end up being a lot of areas that are not covered in that type of network. Next slide. We developed earlier in the work what we have described as the ridership concept. That is taking the current DART network and really focusing on the areas where there's high ridership. The good thing about a network like this is we have a lot more frequent service than we do in the current network, with a number of routes running every 15 minutes, even during the midday. The downside is there are a lot of areas that we currently serve that are not covered by this type of network. Next slide, please. And so when we talk about coverage, the idea behind that is providing some level of service for everyone. And we think more like a traditional social service, where we try and get a route or a service to every location, regardless of how much ridership that we have. And you get more routes, but you generally have less frequency with this type of service. It can be more complex to follow, and there will often be lower ridership, especially on some of the routes that are away from some of the busy corridors. Next slide, please. And so we developed a network that looks at coverage. It very much looks in terms of fixed route, like the current bus network. It serves most of the same locations. Frequency of service is about the same. There's a little more GoLink service in this initial concept that we had developed, but it's closer to the status quo than the ridership concept, certainly. Next slide. And so the board has spent 2020 in extensive discussions about the appropriate balance between ridership and coverage goals. Board members expressed interest in a new network which improves frequency and ridership growth potential over the current network, but members also expressed concern on the impact that the new network might have on the walk distances that customers would have to reach the nearest route or service. Next slide, please. And so in response to those considerations, we developed what we're describing as a hybrid network concept that combines service frequency improvements from the ridership concept, expanded GoLink service, and some coverage-oriented routes. The hybrid approach is designed to maintain service coverage while setting aside some resources for frequency improvements. And you can see the expanded GoLink service on this map in terms of the orange areas that are in various locations. It doesn't serve every single route segment that the current route serves, but the GoLink zones cover a lot of the areas that don't have fixed route service. Next slide, please. At the November board meeting, the board unanimously adopted a resolution that governs the appropriate ridership coverage balance that we will be using for the work that follows on the bus network redesign. And the resolution basically directed the project team to develop what we're calling a draft final bus network based upon the hybrid network with a ridership coverage ratio that moves a little bit more towards ridership than where we are in the current network, determined to maximize the most efficient approach and based upon the fiscal 20 budget for service level resources. And what that last item basically means is our intent in 2022, is to go back to the level of service that we were operating before the pandemic. DART through about the last 2/3 of 2020 and into 2021 has been offering reduced services. We had reduced services significantly up through October. And then beginning in October, we adopted new schedules that represent operating about 90% of the level of service pre-pandemic. Our goal is to get that service back to 100% for the changes that we would be doing in January 2022. Next slide, please. And so immediately after the board decision, DART staff, city staff from the DART cities, including Farmers Branch, and the Jarrett Walker and Associates consulting team spent an entire week in virtual sessions to design a draft bus network plan based upon the board's direction. We had very active participation from the staff, including the Farmers Branch staff, and there were discussions on sensitive street segments, neighborhoods served, city objectives, and other issues. And at the end of the workshop, we completed the starting point for that plan, including route definitions, basic frequency assumptions, and locations for expanded GoLink service. The next slide, if we could go to that, shows the product of that design workshop, which was actually a drawing in Photoshop since we were doing this virtually. You can see the routes on this map. This covers most, but not all, of the service area. Generally, the color of the line represents the frequency that would be provided during the middle of the day, between roughly 9 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon, often more frequent service during peak rush hour periods. The reds represent 15-minute service, the purple 20-minute service, blue 30, teal 40, and so on. The gold areas that you see on this map represent GoLink, both in terms of the existing zones, expansions to the current zones, and new zones that would be added. And so our goal now is to take this drawing that was laid out with the concept and actually develop a more detailed plan to go along with it. Next slide, please. We are now going through many of the details that translate that concept into a draft bus network plan. That network that you saw on the previous slide was the basis for drawing out routes and making key service assumptions. And then we turn to define details, the individual route alignments, service frequencies by time of day, weekend service levels, associated costs to make sure that we meet budget targets. And in fact, we're even writing preliminary schedules that we may use. We'll refine them, but will be the basis for what we do down the road. And then with those details, we can analyze the impact of this network, basically how it performs, looking at the relationship to customers, to workers, and residents. And our goal is to present that analysis to the board next month. And so we are very much into that analysis phase right now. Next slide, please. The draft network that we've refined a little bit since November is shown on the right on this slide. The fixed route network has a somewhat thinner ridership-oriented design. In some cases, routes are spaced more widely than they are in the current network, but there are more routes that offer frequent service, more than double offering 20-minute or service or better. And all routes have weekend service, which is not the case with the current network. We have a number of routes that don't run on Sunday or don't run on weekends, as a matter of fact. There are also many more GoLink zones to maintain service coverage. We go from about 15 DART-funded GoLink zones to 28. And some of the GoLink zones that already exist, and Farmers Branch happens to be one of them, were expanded, in this case, expanded to the west to include locations on the other side of the freeway. Next slide, please. Where do we go from here? After creating the draft bus network, at least the early basis for it, we've got to get it ready for presentation. That includes what I mentioned earlier, that we're defining the network, we're checking our work, and we're analyzing the impacts on everyone. We're going to present that draft bus network plan to the DART board next month for initial consideration. Next slide, please. The plan will be the basis for proposed January 2022 service changes. We're going to be discussing the plan and the service changes to go along with it after the board has been able to review and perhaps suggest changes to what we've drafted initially. That public outreach will be happening this spring. We are not yet sure how much of that will be in person, how much will be virtual. We would certainly prefer to do as much in-person meeting as we are able to do, depending on the situation with the pandemic, when we get to likely April and May, when most of the meetings will be scheduled. And we're ultimately aiming for a final decision on both the draft network and the service changes by the end of the summer. And the goal is to implement as much of this as we can afford in January of 2022. So our goal is to do a very major service change up front rather than doing this incrementally over a period of time. And I might mention that in addition to the basic plan, which we've talked about here, later in the year, we're going to be working on a more aspirational version of the plan that basically lays out if there are more resources to do more frequent service or expand on what we've done, what would those changes look like down the road, anticipating what we might be able to do beyond next January. Next slide, please. This is the final slide, and it has got the project schedule from when we started back in late 2019 to where we are right now, getting ready to present the draft network plan to the board, culminating in the implementation of the service changes in January 22, or at least as much of them as we are able to do at this point. That's an overall view of where we are with this bus network redesign right now. I'll stop at that point. I thank everyone for the opportunity to make this presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or discussion on this particular item.
Mr. Smith, thank you very much for, can we check my mic whenever we get a chance? I don't think. Can you all hear me out there?
Yes.
No? Okay. I know you can, but just want to thank you and your team for your time, energy, and effort, and just the outreach that you've put into this endeavor. I know that it's something that's been long and arduous, and there's still work to be done, but I believe it's definitely something that's going to be beneficial not only to our region and the service area, but to the Metroplex in whole. And so I just want to thank you for those efforts, and I'll kick it over to Councilmember Rotana. Do you have any questions for Mr. Smith at this time?
I do, thank you. And I echo what the mayor just said. And I think this is definitely a very important task that you all are going through. And it's definitely been a long time coming, as I think we were talking about that even when I was at the city of Dallas a couple of years ago, in the redesign of a lot of the services, especially in some of the hard to reach areas. And I guess to that end, I guess my question to you is, how can we as a council assist in ensuring that those hard to reach communities are able to give their input, because those are some of the ones that are some of the highest users, those that are not able to have a means of transportation, so they use the DART bus as well as the rail. Would love to get insights on how you all propose that we are able to assist in these endeavors moving forward, especially as the spring comes and you all are trying to get as much input as possible from the committee, knowing that the virtual options a lot of times become a disenfranchisement for some of those folks. Would love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, what we're going to try and do is, this will obviously entail a lot of meetings, both regular meetings that we would typically schedule, and if we need to schedule special visits, whether it is neighborhood groups or others that we're able to do at that point in time, we would be happy to work with everyone if there are better forums to reach out to people. I know Hans Michael Ruta, who's our planner, who deals with Farmers Branch issues, will be heavily involved, as he typically has been. We're very open to different ideas about the best way to reach people, and we're still crafting exactly what that input process is going to look like as we move forward.
Thank you. And I think I would love to, whenever you all do have that process formalized, to get a separate update, and either it may be through our staff or even having you come back, because I would love to kind of see what that looks like, to see what the options are, and see how we can use our resources to ensure that you all are able to get the input necessary. So thank you so much. I appreciate that and look forward to learning more about what that looks like in the future.
Okay.
That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Norwood.
I don't want to make this too long, but I was interested in your comment about if there's adequate resources, and then the more aspirational plan. How will those trade-offs be made on where you cut to fit within your budget? And given that Farmers Branch has been in the system more than 30 years and paying our 1% of our tax revenue to DART, how do we ensure that we get the best coverage possible?
Well, everything that I've included in this presentation, when I've shown the draft network and all the details, can be done within our current budget for bus services. And so what we're doing, and by current budget, I mean the normal non-pandemic budget. I don't mean what we're actually operating at this minute. And the board is committed to going back to that level of service. And our goal with the hybrid approach that we've taken is to make sure that we do provide coverage for all of the existing riders one way or another, whether it's through fixed route service or through GoLink. I think when we get the analysis done, we may actually show that we've increased coverage in terms of walking access to service a little bit over the current network. That's certainly the way things look. And so our goal is to try and develop a network that accomplishes that with the resources that we already have. And then the board has talked about an interest in looking beyond that, where resources may be available down the road to do things like 15-minute midday service on trains and on frequent bus service routes and other types of improvements of that nature. We'll also identify those in the plan, but we may not be able to afford to do those right up front when we make the big changes next year.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Lynn.
Mr. Smith, we have a lot of seniors that rely on the GoLink service for transportation, and I'm curious, I just had a couple questions in regards to that. One, is there going to be a cost increase for the GoLink service?
That we are not envisioning a change in the fares for the GoLink service. That would be addressed as a part of whenever DART does its next fare service change. It's not a part of this plan, and we're not programming in changes because of this plan.
Okay. Then I'll skip to my last question, and that will be, will there be an education campaign available to the public once these changes are instituted, and especially for those who are participating in GoLink service at this time?
Yes, absolutely. There will be probably a combination of both media, and what we've done when we've expanded GoLink is actually in some cases go out and either ride buses or ride GoLink vehicles to talk to people directly about changes in the program. We did that most recently when we changed some of the technology that we're using for GoLink service, and we'll be going out to do that aggressively later in the year once we know what this is going to look like.
Councilmember Baumgartner.
Yes, one of the numbers I didn't see, and maybe I missed it as you're going through the presentation, was the total increase in, we'll call it miles, that the buses are going to run. Is there going to be, are we just shuffling the schedules? Are we adding buses and, an increased number of routes? What is it a 10% increase or a 15 or 20, or is it, in terms of miles covered?
The base plan, what we are likely to implement in January, is a 0% increase over the level of service that we had prior to the pandemic. So it is about, so it's roughly going back to where we were in January of 2020, the same hours and miles of service and dollars as we were running at that point. That is about a 11 or 12% increase over what we are running on our reduced schedule right now. The other part of the plan will identify future improvements. Those would involve extra hours and miles, and we would need to identify a way to pay for them down the road to be able to do them.
Thanks. Councilmember Driscoll.
Questions I had have already been asked and answered. Just like to thank you, Mr. Smith, for the presentation. It's very helpful, and I look forward to the update when you have the new ridership plan.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, again, just want to thank you for being here today for the educational update, and look forward to the continued outreach and kind of development of this plan as it continues out over the next year.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right. We will move on to A3, discussion regarding a proposed ordinance number 3647, amending Chapter 2, Administration, Article 3, Code of Ethics, by amending Section 2-278 definitions to add definitions of campaign contribution and discretionary contract, and amending annual certification and adding Section 2-287 prohibiting campaign contributions to city council candidates. You or me? So this is essentially a continuation of the discussion we had in November at that second council meeting, to where there seemed to be some kind of consensus around a direction to move, and kind of, what we were looking to accomplish with this. And I know Councilmember Blackson was on his way out, Councilmember Driscoll was on his way in, and so there was no point to take action that night, just given that the conversation happened in study session, and we would have a new council member in the regular session. So letting the holidays kind of settle down, wanted to bring this back, continue the conversation around kind of the conversations about, not allowing campaign contributions from anyone that has a contract with anyone in the city, just on appearance of kind of impropriety or anything to the like to where, it's kind of more of on the up and up as we move forward. But then there was also some conversation about potential campaign contribution limits. And so given where we left that off, just kind of wanted to continue the conversation around that as we look to move forward one way or another. I would like to add that depending on what we decide to do here, this is probably, the last time I would recommend we bring this conversation back, at least during my term as mayor. So that's where I just kind of want to see where everyone stands based on that conversation and have some direction to potentially move forward or not at all. And so with that, I will open it up. Councilmember Ratana, you have any comments regarding this discussion?
I mean, my sentiments haven't really changed since the last discussion. Definitely open to exploring that. And I wasn't sure if, I believe there were some other ordinances that were brought up by other cities, including Austin. So I'm not sure if we were going to have any type of insights from staff on what those are and what have occurred with some of the changes that other cities have made. But my sentiments haven't really changed, and just look forward to seeing what the other council members think about it as well.
Okay, and just as a refresher to some of the sentiments that were as the new ordinance is kind of written in terms of what constitutes a contract with the city and not, and in terms of the campaign contribution limits, the initial discussion was, I believe, centered around $500 per any individual, and what we've seen in some other cities looks at that number moving to kind of keep up with inflation over time, just so that you have, a number that's not always set at a lower number. And I think, was it Rowlett or what was the city recently that passed a $1,000 ordinance? Was it Plano? It was a local city.
This is modeled after Irving.
Yeah, well, Irving's, this is modeled after Irving's policy, which doesn't have a limit on it, but there were conversations around it, and the initial number that was thrown out was $500, which was kind of a, mid-mark. And so just wanted to, as Councilmember Ratana said, the conversation around that, just wanted to update everyone on where we were when that left off. Councilmember Norwood.
As my colleague just said, my sentiments haven't really changed. I do support the ordinance. I didn't see anything on the specific limit here. I had a question to ask about the 500. You just addressed that. I'd be okay with 500, 1,000, whatever it is that we think is the right level. And I would say that, just because somebody contracted with the city can't give a contribution, that would not, in my mind, prohibit a person that works for such company from giving a contribution, would it? Because that's still a personal, that $1,000 limit. So let's say I own company XYZ and I was providing widgets to the city.
I think it would govern not only the owner of the company, but also anyone employed through that company as well, because you would still have that connection to that entity on a group of people that could be making a decision for or against said company.
The only thing I noted is that it becomes very hard to trace and to enforce, and some company that's has a DBA that's there in Austin, how do we know that that's the same company that has a business in Farmers Branch? So I think there's as has been noted by others, there's some definite challenges, but it doesn't mean that we should not embrace the thing for me here is not to restrict anybody's freedom or their ability to, participate in the process. It's strictly, and has come up a number of times, came up for myself right after I got on council. And, an accusation was made that was completely untrue. And yet that whole thing could have been avoided by something like this. And so it just avoiding the appearance of impropriety, in my mind, rises equally as high as actual impropriety. And so I think it makes the whole process cleaner. I don't know what the right level is, 500, 1,000, that seems like a fairly large amount of money regardless. And so I would support the ordinance.
Councilmember Lynn.
Well, I spent some time trying to research this since our last discussion, and I'm still of the opinion, I think that we're trying to create a solution for a problem that doesn't exist, and let me tell you why. This issue has been studied at least twice before by charter review committees, chaired by Nancy Hardy both times. They decided that the current rules that we have in place and those spelled out by the Texas Ethics Commissions are sufficient for the city of Farmers Branch. So my question is, why should Farmers Branch ordinances be stricter than what has been set by the Texas legislature? Number one. I would rather see who is donating to campaigns, as it tells me a lot about the person running and their supporters. For example, let's just use a hypothetical. Let's say if I see that John Doe donated to candidate Smith, and I don't like John Doe, then I probably am not going to vote for candidate Smith. And that information is on the city website because we're required by law to file campaign finance reports. My fear is that by imposing stricter restrictions or limitations, that the following may happen. One, only rich people are going to be able to afford to run for office. One of the hardest things for people to do is ask their neighbors for money, and most won't, and thus some good people won't put forth the effort to run because it is a little bit costly for those that are seeking office. It could lead to under the table or backroom dealings where you won't know how candidates are getting their funding. It may promote more graft or corruption coming by imposing these limitations rather than having it all out there in the public. And then I think the third thing, and what's most important to me, is that PACs will become more powerful, and they'll be able to put info out on behalf of candidates that cannot be traced. We've seen that in several elections here in our city. You don't know where the PAC is located or who its donors are because they adhere to a whole separate set of rules. So I don't think that this is wise for us to take on at this time. And if we do want to visit it again, perhaps the people to visit it would be the Charter Review Committee next time we do that, because it would be a more representative segment of the citizenship, and they are not elected, they're appointed. And so their eyes are going to be a little bit different in going over this information versus candidates or office holders that have been elected that have campaigns at stake.
Thank you. Councilmember Baumgartner.
So I think I've found a position in my head that's kind of a hybrid. I agree with Councilman Lynn that I think there is more transparency if we don't chase the money to the PACs, and the people who want to create influence will that have big dollars to give will, I think, and want to influence, will certainly move to the PACs. I don't think they'll just give up and not participate. And I would rather have the dollars transparent and who's giving, but at the same time, I think I find myself embracing the limits on the amount of campaign contributions. Again, I don't know 500 seems a little slow. I think I shared last time that, originally I'd never intended on running, and people came and asked me and said that they would help me with contributions. And I got equal contributions from what I would call the conservative and the liberal side of our city. But not being familiar with the systems in that part, to go out and to raise the capital to get it done might have been, might have chased me from the race. It's tough to go back and say specifically, this is what I would have done or wouldn't have done. But I do think that the process of, chasing, the PACs, the real, when we get right down to it, and we've all been accused, right? I've been accused, Councilman Lynn's been accused, Councilman Norwood's been accused, previous council member, that I can remember in council meetings, right, by someone, and that is, first of all, I think it's disappointing that we're doing that, right? I think we should have, it's one thing to talk about an issue, but to talk about someone's morals, I think, without specific detail is wrong. But the real challenge to our city has not been in our political elections. It has not come from really the individuals. It's come from these mailers, that people that are being sent out by PACs, we don't know where they're coming from. And they're the, they can say anything because nobody's held specifically accountable. And I know through that process, the mayor and Councilman Norwood and I have all, Councilman Norwood and I, they were saying untruths about us during the last election, and we weren't even running. Right? Just to poke, so I just think that I don't want to chase more money to the PACs. I don't want to strengthen that. And I think that is a net effect. I do, I think a limit. I think 500 is probably on the low side. I think anybody who runs for city council that can be influenced by $1,000 has, shouldn't have enough support because of a lack of character. If $1,000 can influence how you're going to vote or something like that, I think, shows a lack of character that should disqualify them from even their friends voting for them. And, so I would be more comfortable in that range, be flexible on the range. But anyway, that's what I think.
Thank you, Councilmember Baumgartner. Just a quick update. It was Plano that recently passed an ordinance, and that's at $1,000. And that is a city the size of 250,000 people. So, we're close to 50. And you just want to look at the reach that those dollars have to go in that city compared to ours. And, just like you said, somewhere, is it 5,000? Is it 1,000? Just giving out some benchmarks that Austin had 500. Plano has 1,000. So there's kind of a little bit of a range there. Councilmember Driscoll.
Yes. In general, I support this effort. I think that in some of our local elections and certainly in other elections, spending has kind of gone wild. And I think for a city, even as we approach 50,000, it kind of pains me in a way to see huge amounts of money spent on mayoral elections. And having just run a campaign, I understand, we need money to run a campaign, And I'm basically in favor of this. Whether we have a limit of $500, $750, $1,000, I think that would be kind of a baseline. And I haven't heard discussion of it, and I know this preceded my time being elected on council, but if we had 500 or 750 or whatever, is that going to be for an individual? And then, for example, if it is 500, then a couple, I guess if each wanted to give, that would be $1,000. And I don't mind if our standards are a little bit higher than those of the state. I don't have a problem with that. And also, I think if you're going to run, say, in our city for local election, and whether it's, again, 1,000, 500, 750, whatever we might decide, if you don't have enough people that want to support you, well, maybe that's an indication you really don't need to run. And then to the point with PACs, I mean, I was just elected and I was attacked by one in the last week of the election. And I don't know who's behind it, whatever, but it didn't seem to have the effect that was intended. And so PACs are, part of our political landscape. But I don't see why that would preclude us from having some sort of a campaign limit that I think would be reasonable.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Driscoll. Councilmember Ratana, any comments? Any additional comments? Councilmember Norwood?
I think I've said enough, but I think the 1,000 is probably where I would land. If Plano's do it, that's what Plano's doing. I think Austin started out at 250, if I remember right, and I think they've increased that. And so I'd rather not have to play the game of, increase an index for inflation or whatever, just 1,000 per individual. So if you had a household of 10 people and they all gave 1,000, there's 10,000, but it's all individually done.
I was going to say, because I know some people, some folks have said 500, 1,000, maybe finding a happy medium, 750. I mean, I think, I don't want to get too in the weeds of the numbers, but at the same time, I think, much like some have said that raising funds limits or not being able to, having limitations may deter folks from running. I think having, the raising of the funds piece can also deter certain folks from running that may not be able to have the funds available. And so I would kind of want to be a little more conservative with that, but I'm definitely open to either, 750, 500. I think, based on what, to your point, Mayor, with the 1,000, Plano is so much bigger, and their limitation, I would think, would be bigger because they're, they have to span, their reach is a lot larger than ours. So I would say, I know some folks saying 500, some folks saying 1,000, maybe we could be in the middle and have the limit be 750.
Thank you. Councilmember Lund?
Mayor, could I jump in for a second?
Certainly, Mr. Smith.
Mayor, under the, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Under the Plano ordinance, it's not a prohibition of a campaign contribution, it's a recusal requirement. So if a council member has received a campaign contribution of $1,000 or more, then they have to abstain from voting on the matter, and under their ordinance, declared as a conflict of interest. So it doesn't prohibit the $1,000 campaign contribution, just says they can't vote on it.
That is interesting, and essentially gets to the same,
It gets to
the same point.
Same thing you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And it doesn't then limit the, oh, sorry. Okay. I was saying that it seems to get to the same thing that we would like to accomplish, but then it doesn't limit to somebody's doing business with the city and they give you $10,000 check, then it just means that from then on, you won't be able to participate in that, any issue with that particular corporation.
I actually kind of like that better.
Yeah, I kind of like it better too, rather than, as Councilman Lynn was saying, we're prohibiting people from participating in the process. We don't prohibit it, we just put aside that appearance.
Yes.
And it protects us and it keeps our deliberations much cleaner. So I like it better.
Yeah. Councilmember Lund?
I guess at this point, I'd sort of like to see what Plano has written and maybe take that into consideration as we try to move forward. I'm still not at ease with all of this because it's not cheap to run for office. It is not. And to do mailers and to do signs and whatnot does cost money. And the flip side of that is I don't feel like I have the right to limit what somebody wants to donate to somebody else's campaign. Mayor, we all probably got donations over $1,000 from some people, and that's their right to do that because I guess they're big fans of whoever they're supporting, and they want those people to have every advantage. So I just, again, I don't think that we're overrun with a problem here. I think that maybe there's some other factors that are driving this, but I'd like to see what Plano has come up with and then use that in terms of making a decision to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Baumgartner.
Yeah, I like you and John, and I like the caveat of if you give more than whatever that number is that we decide on, then it prohibits you from just voting and participating in that discussion. I think that's fair and reasonable. I'm also, when you think about the fact that multiple people can give, I would be okay with $750, as Councilwoman Rotano said. That's still $1,500 for a wife and a husband. I think as it localizes the number in terms of making a big one, and then if going above that prohibits it, I think it will discourage corporations that are like-minded with a candidate that maybe a pro-growth candidate who somebody wants to support. They would limit it because they would want them to participate, right? So, in the conversation. So I'd be happy with that number, and that I'd like to see the language and understand a little better, but with that.
Thank you. Councilmember Driscoll.
Yes, number one, from what I've just learned about the new policy in Plano, it appeals to me. Number two, the number I would be most in favor of would be $1,000. And number three, I would not be in favor of having a lesser amount and then say, let's have an index. I think that just kind of complicates the whole scenario.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Based on kind of what we heard, I think kind of the directions maybe to bring this back with Plano's more in mind, leave the dollar amount open. Something that can be decided at the next time that would give Councilmember Lynn an opportunity to study that ordinance and wrap his head around it and poke any holes as he chooses to do so, and all of us as well, depending on what we see. But I think that's probably the kind of direction, and then look to bring that back and maybe take action here in a meeting in the near future. Next is A4, discuss adding
Can I say something?
Oh, yeah, you may.
I just want to thank everybody on the council. I think we had a very productive discussion where not all of us agreed and reached a point where we probably none of us started. And I think that it's a good thing that we ought to celebrate. I think it speaks well of the current composition of this council.
Thank you, Councilmember Norwood. A4, discuss adding a non-binding item to the May 1st, 2020 ballot related to residential garbage bins and other options. And so, Mr. Davis, I'll let you kick it off based on some of the findings that we've uncovered in between this meeting and the last.
Shane Davis, Director of Sustainability and Public Health. Since the last meeting, we dug up back in 2019, I believe it was the correct year, done some research. We did a survey in terms of garbage carts. Y'all asked about that. Did we do a survey in the past and what that entail? And that was provided to you. At that point in time, I think 2/3 of the folks said no, they did not want a cart. 1/3 were in favor of it. We also asked them if you had a cart size, you could pick between 95 versus 35. And then we also asked them would they be willing to pay a fee. And the fee, of course, kind of got the lowest mark. But that was fine from last time in terms of the surveys. One has been conducted. The data is out there and available. Since that time, though, on the west side's kind of come online. So you do have, in the city, you have two different sets of services. You have carts for garbage recycling on the west side, cart for recycling only on the east side, twice a week service for garbage on the east side, once a week garbage on the west side with the carts. That's kind of break down the service in the city of Farmers Branch. Whether you want to put it on a ballot, have a survey, that's kind of discussion you're going to have, figure out what you want to do, but you have a survey that's been done before. There's also a third option, which is could you consider a pilot program where you allow folks to opt into this and pay for it, pay for the entire service. That'd be the cost of the cart plus the additional increasing cost for the service itself. It does cost more to use carts twice per week. That's the most expensive service you could provide. We can get into the details more if you want to on that one, but I think at this point in time, it's up to y'all to just kind of decide what you want to do moving forward with the information you have. And if I can help out in some way in terms of answering questions, I'm here for you, so.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Appreciate that. Based on the third option that you kind of recommended, that would probably be something that I would actually lean more towards, which is an opt-in kind of pilot program that allows people the opportunity to pay for such service if they want it, so long as a baseline benchmark of we need at least 100 people to recover the cost of what this added service is going to be in the pilot area. So that, we know that cost is recovered, and, as more and more people join the program, does that cost go down just because you're spreading over a bigger base for people that do want a cart and that type of service. And so it's more of a opt-in, not a mandatory thing.
Correct.
And that's kind of where I would lean on some of that rather than some of the other direction we've had, just based, on reminding ourselves what that survey looked like that was, a year and a half old. But I'm going to go ahead and, since this was an item that Councilmember Baumgartner wanted to bring up, I'm going to start with him and then work around to the council from there. So, Councilmember Baumgartner, any comments or points you want to add or questions to Shane?
Yeah, I think, of course, a lot has changed in the last few years, and the adoption rate of recycling bins has been significant and increasing as time goes on. I think we're now over 80%.
We've stayed right at 85%, sometimes 84, sometimes 86, but it's hovered right at 85 for a long time now.
So we're in the mid 80% range, which I think shows that our citizens prefer it. There's been a lot of conversation, and I would be in favor of. I think what you're talking about is, doing a pilot program if you want. Maybe set the size on 2 different carts, and maybe, along with your application, it's a one-time fee of $75 for a smaller cart or bin and $100 for a larger bin, to keep it simple in the process to do it, and to run a pilot program for 6 months or a year to roll it out, see how it's adopted, and people will decide whether they want to opt in or opt out as they go along. I would be heavily in favor of a program like that.
Thank you, Councilmember Baumgartner. Councilmember Lynn.
I have no problem with a pilot program. My issue, as I've said all along, is not really with the carts themselves, the use of trash bins, because I do use one myself. But residents have been very outspoken about their desire to not have bins. And when I met with the director of the Irving Sanitation Department, she was telling me that she would love to switch to bins, but the will of the people just isn't there right now. They like putting their bags out and stuff disappears, and it's pretty clean for the resident to handle that. But we may have we may have more varmints and critters in Farmers Branch than some other cities, who knows. But my issue is that if we do adopt a program, and I assume that someday we will, it may be sooner than we expect, but we will, just as we see right now, you can drive down almost any street in the city and see blue bins. They're supposed to be screened and out of sight, and that's not happening. We essentially created a code enforcement nightmare when we took on recycling, as well intentioned as that was. And I still support the recycling program, but I agree with the neighbors, or at least my neighbors, who don't want to look at the blue bins. I don't think it's a good policy of trying to fine people out of living in the city, and because that gives an appearance that it's a money grab by the city, that we've got bins out there and you didn't put your bin up, so we're going to fine you. Well, you know, the city of Farmers Branch is not that desperate for money, but we need to mandate or enforce compliance. So I'm not, that's the one part of this that really has me concerned, is how do we keep our city looking nice if we do this, and then understanding that not everybody will want a bin.
Right.
So are those, will the incremental cost of supplying or of providing bins be borne by those that do want them?
Yes.
And so, and we've answered that, but it bears repeating for those that are watching on TV or whatnot. So, you know, I hope that if we do this, and I have a pretty good feeling that if somebody's opting into a pilot program, that they're going to want to do it by the rules and adhere to the rules.
I think especially when I pay money to do that, I would agree with you, sir.
Yeah. So I guess the long and short of it is I have no problem with us putting a pilot program out there. I think that would be good to do.
And for the residents, there's been no discussion of changing ordinances in terms of reducing the screening requirement. That there's been no discussion of that. So going forward, if y'all chose to go forward with the pilot program, that requirement does not go away. So just to make that known too.
Thank you. Councilman Norwood.
Man, I'm tired of talking about this. 6 years, we're still talking about it. Here's what I think. The main reason that we hear that people would like to have a trash cart is because the creatures are getting into their stuff. We've allowed the entire west side to have these carts. We've denied them to the rest of the Farmers Branch population, and now we've said, oh, and by the way, if you have a problem with animals strewing your trash around, you get to pay an additional fee to have a cart so that you can protect your property from having trash strewn around. To me, this seems a little bit inequitable, but I'm not going to make a big deal out of it because I really like to get this behind us. And, you know, the only real argument I've heard against having the trash bins is they're ugly. And so it's always been an aesthetic argument, not a quality argument or an ability to actually pick up the trash and pick up the recycling. So I would like to see those people that really have an issue at least have some relief, but I do have a fundamental issue with charging them to have that relief. Because if it's a problem that the city is forcing on them, then it seems like the city could pick up or defray or have some kind of role in keeping the costs low for residents that are experiencing this type of problem. So that's my only fundamental thing against it. I'm happy to do a pilot program, and I'd really like to not talk about this issue too many more times.
Well, the good news is the pilot would get past your last day. So, Councilmember Rotano.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for sharing that survey. I think it was pretty extensive, so I appreciate that, and I think that answers a question related to whether we need to have something or not. And that was before my time, so thank you for sharing that. I too, and talking to staff, have advised that, I would definitely be in favor of a pilot program. I think for me, it's more about just giving folks the option to be able to have that amenity if they wish to have it. Obviously, I would love to see if we could defray the cost as well somehow, but I understand that may open a whole nother conversation, and then, in fact, may even deter folks from even being able to get that, right? And so based on history, and so I would definitely be in favor of a pilot. Again, just would like to just give folks the option to have that, because I know, especially with some of our aging population, it gets hard when critters do get in, and then they have to clean it up, and weather sometimes is not our friend. So anyways, I'd definitely be in favor of that. So thank you again, staff, for all of your help.
And for folks at home that truly can't get their garbage to the curb, please give us a call. We can work out a solution with you. For those that truly are unable to get it to the curb, that we do have a solution. So you can call Sustainability and Public Health and talk to us, and we will come up with a resolution for you.
Perfect. Thanks. Councilmember Driscoll.
Yes. I'm in favor of the opt-in program. I know a lot of folks don't like it when they're kind of told what to do by government, and I like the fact this would be optional. And I've talked with several residents in the last days, and the feedback I've got is most people are in favor of them for different reasons. Some for environmental reasons, they don't want to see more plastic in the environment. Other people because their trash gets torn open and it gets strewn about, and I've seen that many times throughout the city. So I'm in favor of the opt-in program, and if we're not going to charge people for it, that's even better. Some residents have told me they wouldn't mind paying a one-time fee to have the bins, and that's what I've heard from people.
Okay. Thank you very much. I kind of feel like we have consensus to move forward with developing a framework of what this pilot program might look like and bring something back to council to evaluate.
Well, in terms of the last time we negotiated the contract, we negotiated the pricing. So, and the contract's already been approved by council. If council so desires, we could, just a consensus tonight, we could move forward with a 6-month pilot program based on the parameters you've heard so far. We could also bring something back, but I'm not sure that what you're going to hear come back is going to be much different than what you've heard here. It would be essentially to provide, again, a 6-month pilot program to allow people to opt in voluntarily if they want to have a bin, and they'd pay a one-time cost. Again, 6-month pilot program, and at the end of that period, council could decide whether to continue the program or not, but just if you wanted, we could move forward just based on the direction tonight.
Okay. Councilmember Raton, how do you feel about moving forward based on that? Okay. Councilmember Norwood?
Move forward.
Councilmember Lynn? Yep. Councilmember Baumgartner?
Let's move forward.
Councilmember Driscoll, got to ask you as well.
Full speed ahead.
Cool. All right, there you go. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. A5, discuss proposed changes to the CADG Mercer Crusher Holdings LLC development agreement. Ms. Fergens.
Thank you. Tina Fergens, Planning Director. On your agenda this evening, or excuse me, this afternoon, is consideration of amendment to the Centurion American Development Agreement. As you're well aware of, the city has a development agreement with CADG related to certain improvements being constructed on the west side, one of which is an amphitheater. And so the map before you, this is consistent with the graphic that was in your packet, so it illustrates the location of the amphitheater site. The agreement also requires usage of the amphitheater by the Homeowners Association that was negotiated this past summer of August 2020. Currently, we do have a pending zoning case and a companion specific use permit that the developers requested in order to be able to take the next steps to move forward with the construction of the amphitheater as they're contractually obligated to do so. However, I know you have received many emails over the past week or so expressing increased neighborhood opposition to the amphitheater, as well as concerns regarding the associated office building that the developer intends to build on that property, as well as providing for a helicopter landing pad, or what we refer to as a heliport. So the developer is requesting a discussion with the council in order to consider other potential uses on that property, given the increased neighborhood opposition, the fact that they're contractually obligated to construct this, the amphitheater facility. Any deviation from that agreement would result in having to amend that agreement, as well as the existing zoning, and establish new zoning in place for whatever could be built on the property. So I'll turn it over to y'all for direction, but be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Councilmember Rotano, since this is your district.
Lots of questions. So just in council, I know that several have asked about kind of, what's been going on and thoughts around this area. And I've been meeting with residents for a while now and discussing, their thoughts on not only this area, but other areas. Obviously, we're going to be focusing on this particular area now. Had meetings with, the HOA, the developer, as well as residents, just to get thoughts on, what could happen here. And really, again, going back to the development plan itself, it was put into place way before we had actually people here. And it was before our time. There are certain elements that obviously have changed since then. And so, a lot of times we have this 10-year, 20-year plan, but as density comes in, as people come in, plans change. And so right now we're at a point where what can we do to ensure that the quality of life for our residents, ensure that they're heard, but also ensure that we have something in place here that's going to be positive for our community, not only for the next 5 years, but the next 20, 30, 40 years. And the great thing is that we have this really great amenity with the lake here, and prior to COVID, an amphitheater in a building may have been the best option, right? But in looking at what has occurred since then, and looking at the trends that have happened through an economic development lens, and the uses of these types of amenities, especially a more enclosed type of amenity in the amphitheater as opposed to a more public type space, we feel that, at least I feel that it's time to kind of look at where can we work with our developer to and work with also the residents on what options could be here. And so staff, I know that, I've asked what would be, the repercussions as to if we would change this. Obviously, to your point, Tina, we would need to amend the development agreement to indicate such changes based on what the council direction is. And really just want to have that discussion now. And my understanding is that the developer, as you see here on the screen, is open to single-family attached homes. One of the biggest things that I think that, and I've asked staff about this as well, is how would that affect the PID assessment, and making sure that, the costs don't rise for our residents, because that is something that's also a big issue for them on the HOA side, which again, I won't go into that because I want to make sure we stay on topic, but that's another concern that a lot of the residents have had on other occasions. So I want to make sure that wasn't a concern here. And based on my discussions, I think that it would pretty much be a wash to a certain extent as it relates to how much money would be put into the PID if we move from the commercial development to the single family attached model. And so that's just wanted to give you a little bit of insight and history and kind of the conversations that I've had with the residents. Obviously, we have had some that are in favor, but for the most part, they're definitely opposed to this, and have given several reasons, as you've seen from the letter. Crime, potential crime, and having individuals that aren't from our area come into the venue, but also, again, going back to the economic development piece, the fact that the building across the street is only about 10% occupied. Or at 10% leased. The fact that other businesses around not only our city, but just in the region have seen a decline when it comes to the leasing of their buildings. And then again, the amenity in and of itself, just with COVID and not knowing where that's going to lead. My understanding is that similar projects in other cities have either been, by the same developer, have either been changed. The original plan was an amphitheater, and they have since changed that to, for example, a convention center. And then the other, another amphitheater was just changed completely as well. And so having all of that intel and background, I would definitely would love to explore these options and get obviously insight from staff as to what the next steps would be, and would love to get your thoughts. I did have a couple of questions. I kind of wanted to see what, if there was an opportunity, and again, in discussions with the developer, to see if there is a portion of that site that could be used for as a public amenity. I think that we have a great a lake amenity there, but if we put housing on the entire site, there's going to be very little as to the opportunity to have folks actually be able to enjoy the site to the fullest extent. I know we have the pad site, but it's on the other side of the trail. And not right on the lake. And so I was wondering if that may be something that we could discuss with the developer as well. There's a small corner at the southwest corner of the site, a little pad, if you will, that I think would be a great option for that. Again, just to have a public amenity space that can be used, I don't know if that would be something that the developer would. We can work something out with them on that. If they would, we'd have to, I say we, not the city, but if maybe the HOA has also expressed interest in potentially even purchasing a portion of that site just for that public amenity in the future. And so really just want to get your thoughts on, and obviously we need to get the thoughts of the developer on if that's something that they would be open to. But I have more questions, but I want to open it up for discussion on the main piece, which is moving it from the amphitheater to the single family. But I did want to add that small piece because I think there may be an opportunity to add a public amenity piece to this site as well. Because as you all know, in looking at the parks plan, there is no plan for a public space on the west side. We have park space on, outside of the nature preserve. We don't have really anything in that area because we don't have the space. And so having conversations with staff on where some of these sites could be, because we do have, other residents that live in this area in the multifamily communities as well. But we want to make sure that we are also not forgetting this side of the city when it comes to those public amenities moving forward. So with that, Mayor, I do have more questions, but I would love to get the insights from the rest of my colleagues on this.
Thank you.
Could I ask for clarification, Councilwoman Rotana? So when you were talking about a portion of the property or for some sort of small public amenity, are you referring to a portion of the amphitheater track, or is it possibly this area here that's just immediately east of Chartwell Crest? I just want to make sure I'm on the same page as you.
Sure. So it would be the area that is, and let me just pull it up here. It would be the area east of Chartwell Crest.
Okay.
And if you look at the satellite imaging, there's a small, just west of the lake, there's the curb cut that goes, that big curb cut that kind of looks like a semicircle on the left. And just north of that, there's a little tract of land right there. And I think that's the piece that we would be looking into as a potential public amenity there. So it would be directly west of where the amphitheater is, but directly east of Chartwell Crest.
Okay, so if you can see my cursor on the screen, so somewhere roughly in this area here?
Yes, right there.
Okay, I believe that's already an HOA lot. So that's already actually owned by the homeowners association, because the way this is laid out, there is an open space lot here that is dedicated to the HOA, and Mr. Beatty can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay,
Beatty.
so that's the area. So it is directly, and it abuts the lake side as well. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Great.
Councilmember Norwood.
I'm not opposed to supporting the residents in what they want. I think that they need to be mindful of that if we do a change here, that it could affect the PID assessment. because there no longer be the expected revenue from the amphitheater and the office building. But as long as they're willing to accept that, then we should let it. Now, the one thing that I noted from reading the emails is that it's pretty much the same email sent by numerous people, but they all expected the worst case result, that we wouldn't necessarily have more crime, that we wouldn't necessarily have more traffic and that kind of thing. And, living near the historic park where we have lots of events and living on the main street that people drive down to get to those events, you kind of get used to having those periodic things happen, and it doesn't lead to the worst case scenarios. Now, I know we had some parking problems last time that kind of didn't get addressed, but all in all, it works out pretty well. So I just want to make sure that the input we're getting from the residents really represents a broad majority of the residents and not a few people that have a certain position. And that we do the calculations and figure out if that's going to affect the PIT assessment or not. So that's my only thing, but I want to support whatever the residents want. I mean, when this first thing was considered, everybody seemed to be very enamored with an amphitheater and the entertainment value of it and bringing things into the city. And if they're no longer enamored of that, then we'll change course.
Thank you. Councilman Lynn.
So last week, Councilwoman Rentana and I had the pleasure of attending Homeowners Association meeting out on the west side of the Mercer Crossing HOA. And obviously, council knows we've all received a lot of correspondence from many residents out there, not all of which shared the same sentiment. There were a couple that said that they favored having the amphitheater and whatnot, but the majority of correspondence that we received has been contrary to what the plan has been. And so the councilwoman and I also had a meeting with the developer to review the plans and talk about what would be an acceptable alternative. And that is where these 70 single-family, I'll call them townhome units, have been born out of. The last thing I want to do is try to impose something that 5-6 years ago looked good on paper when everything was being planned, and now that there's actual people out living in an area and some attitudes have changed and whatnot, plans change. They're just a roadmap. And I think it would be silly for us to sit here and try to hold the developer to something that the residents aren't going to want, that they're going to fight, that may not be successful. So knowing that, and after hearing comments at the meeting the other night, I'm of the opinion that if we're going to adjust our plan, we need to obviously have a new understanding, a new developer agreement with our developer partner to do the right thing for the area. We need to be knowledgeable in what everything that's associated with that. What effect it might have on PIT assessment, what effect it might have on other costs related to what the homeowners out there have to bear. And as long as we're upfront about that and know that going in, I don't think that we'll have a problem. The way we were set up looked fine one way, or looked fine early on, I should say. But again, with the time changing and the needs and desires of the residents that are out there now changing also, I think we owe it to them to be responsible to that. But at the same time, when we do make changes to the developer agreement, they need to know that's going to come with a whole new set of rules, time frame, et cetera, et cetera. And as long as we're prepared to do that and be fair and equitable to our developer partner, then I have no problem moving forward with a Plan B that makes good sense for all parties.
Thank you. Councilmember Baumgartner.
Yes, I'm in agreement with this potential transition here. The only question I have is we're talking about this, but the letters that I received also included about the heliport and the office. And are we going to talk about those separately or tonight? Or are we going to just focus on the amphitheater?
My recommendation would be to talk about those separately, as those are items that are going to have to come back later. I mean, if you all feel like you want to address them tonight, we can. But, I just want to remind people that the secondary office building that is a part of this development is not tied to any contract or deliverable in terms of timing. It is purely market-based. So once there is a need for that space, it can still be developed in the future and not as something that has to happen in the near future. The purpose of that last amendment and the way we structured it was to remove some of those things given the pandemic and where things are at and the shift in terms of allowing the market to govern when those properties need to be developed so that they have the best opportunity for success and not something that's forced for you guys to take on when you're not ready to, or the market isn't saying that we need that space at this time. And so, I'm happy to talk about the helipad and some of the other stuff, but I know that is a future item that we're not looking to do tonight.
Well, actually, it would have been it's on the same property as the amphitheater. So, right, it was the way the amphitheater is laying out and the way the developer has the office building proposed. Well, it would have been a phased development, and the heliport or helipad would be on the amphitheater site property. So the applications that we have pending right now are for all three improvements. But you're right, the amphitheater is the only item that they're contractually obligated to construct.
Gotcha. Mr. Beatty, if you can come to the microphone, I have a quick question for you, and I'll get back to you.
Yes, sir.
If you were to shift to single family, I'm assuming that the helipad would no longer be a part of.
That is correct.
Okay.
I don't think it's way, and most likely the office as well. Like she said, we're at 12% pre-leased and the shell's finished. So, and the building, Hickory 2, I think is about 40% occupancy as well.
Mayor, just for a point of clarification, whenever we were discussing this potential option with Mr. Beatty, so thank you so much for getting us those insights related to this potential option. It wasn't all encompassing, so it was the entire the lot itself, the helipad, the building, and the amphitheater, just like it's described here, and that's because obviously. I think that would be something that the developer wished and brought up forth to us as well, saying that, okay, we can, because whenever we were getting the letters from the residents, it was on all three aspects of the development, not just the amphitheater. And so my understanding is, to his point, is that it would be approximately 70 units in the entirety of that lot, correct?
Yes,
okay.
that's correct.
Just for clarification, because I know there are several folks that are listening.
Yep, cool, okay. Councilmember Baumgartner.
Yeah, the only other thing is adding 70 units would, for the homeowners association, would probably reduce the fee somewhat,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, sir.
That would have a positive impact
It will.
on that.
Any other? No. Councilmember Driscoll.
Yes. Yes, I had a question also about whether it's going to be all three issues, the office building and the helipad. Yeah, it seems like, we've all gotten these emails from the residents out there. Just one concern I have, and I don't have an answer, but I just don't know how many people are out there and how representative the people who've gotten organized and written to all of us about this represent, like the majority out there, or if they're just a very organized, vocal minority. That's just something I'll just throw out there. I don't have an answer, just a concern I have. And then secondly, as Councilman Norwood said, whatever we decide. And I think we need to be flexible and listen to the residents and be responsive to their financial implications to that. And then the third point I'd like to make is, well, right now, a lot of people are saying, death to office space, never going to be needed again. Well, we will get through COVID, however long it takes. And I like the approach of, being market-based, because we don't know what office demand is going to be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And especially if more people, move here and we fill out the city. So just a thought I wanted to throw out.
Thank you. Councilman Rotana.
I wanted to kind of speak to the financial implications, because that's also a question, as I was talking to staff, what that would be, because of the fact that the commercial base would be going into the PID assessments to offset some of the cost. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tina, is if, we were to add those single-family attached homes, that the commercial based on the property taxes, there will be, obviously there will be a change in that, but it essentially would be somewhat of a wash, because there would just be a minor delta, correct? If you kind of look at that. I'm not sure, and that's kind of the indication I got from when I got from staff before, but I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on what that would look like. Honestly, we would have to have that conversation, and my next course of action, I think what we should do in getting and having the insights from council would be to have a meeting with the residents to advise that this is part of the discussion. This is something that we're thinking about to ensure transparency as well, letting them know that this would be an option moving forward, but also so they can have that better understanding of what that delta may be. Obviously, we won't know that until it's done, but at least they know what those implications are if we go from what we have proposed now to this new single family attached.
So I'm going to have to call upon my super friends to assist with this, Mr. Coxon and Ms. Evans-Jones.
Okay.
Councilwoman Rotana, one of the things that we were waiting on before we can be exact in that response to you is to kind of get a feel from council as to what direction council wanted to go, because obviously if we're just talking about the amphitheater and not the office, that's one answer. But if council is looking to replace that whole parcel with the amphitheater and the office with potentially 70 single-family attached homes, that's something that we could certainly work with our assessment manager, so to speak, and make sure we get the right number as to what impact that would have on the assessment, as well as what impact it would have on the increment that is used as a credit against the assessments for folks that are out there. So, once we get that feeling from council, when we come back for actually action, we'll have those numbers definite for you.
Okay, and I would actually, would love to have those even before then, so that way we can have that conversation with residents, because I know there was a lot of discussion here today around, how many of the residents are actually opposed to this compared to those that are in favor of the development as it stands today, and would like to give the opportunity for everybody to know that this is what has been discussed, these would be the quote-unquote repercussions, and give the residents the opportunity to be there, have their say, give us insight, so that way we can have better direction, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that whatever is here, it's something that is going to be, have a positive impact in this area for years to come. And if we're going to make a decision like this, I think we need to be very transparent with those that are going to be living in that area as well.
Some of the pieces of the puzzle, I'm sorry, this is Cheryl Evans-Jones, Director of Finance for the city. Some of the pieces of the puzzle that will help us to mathematically kind of put pen to paper and working with our PID manager is developing an understanding about the parcels in particular that we're talking about, what exactly we're planning on putting in there in lieu, and what changes to the potential infrastructure are needed to support those sorts of changes. Those are some of the key pieces of the puzzle that we would need some direction on in order to take those estimates and then begin to calculate what we think any potential benefit to the residents may be, or any potential cost that would be necessary to make such a change.
Just a Mr. Beatty can correct me if I'm wrong, but just some quick math. It's a 40,000 square foot office building, and even if you build that at $300 a foot, which might be on the higher end right now.
With finish out.
With finish out, you're looking at a $12 million office building, and you divide that by the 70 homes that are here, that's approximately $175,000 a unit. Current townhomes in Farmers Branch right now are on the tax rolls for $350,000 plus. I know that personally. And so what you're looking at there with 70 townhomes is almost $25 million worth of value. So I would assume, depending on what the amphitheater was going to generate, this would actually be a positive for the homeowners out there in the PID, just on quick math. And so, if this is something that the residents on the west side want, it sounds like we're supportive if that's the direction they want to go, and if that's a direction that you all are willing to go as well on that 8.7 acres of land. And so, I'm not here to kind of stop that. I think that, as more people move over there, they need to have a say and guide the ship of what they want their neighborhood to look like. And so, just on my level, I can get behind what you guys all agree with, but those are just my quick 2 cents on what that math kind of checks out to as we kind of move forward. But I know, Councilman Rotano, you had a chance to have a second round of comments. Councilman Norwood, you're going to pass. Councilman Lynn, you're good. Good. Councilman Driscoll.
I'm good.
Okay. So, I just want to confirm the consensus I'm hearing is to potentially move forward down this path. But we do have a lot of work to do with the unwinding of the agreements, both development agreement, the new amendment, all the other stuff that we've looked at. So we're going to have come back and have some conversations, but I think it's prudent that we all make sure that we reach out, and then Councilmember Driscoll brought up, just make sure that we're hearing the representative voice out there, that we're making that right decision, and it's not just the minority. But I think that's kind of where we're at. And Mr. Cox.
Yes, Mayor, I have a question for Tina Fergens. In terms of the zoning that's in place right now, okay, if we were to move to take that whole parcel and move towards single-family attached, I'd be willing to bet that the zoning doesn't allow that right now, correct?
Yes and no. Right now, so this parcel is unique compared to other properties within the Mercer Crossing neighborhood in that it still retains the Planned Development District 88 designation. So with that right now, it was designated as Urban Center Reserve. The zoning requires that the property be rezoned to Urban Center, of which residential is an allowed use. Now, when PD 88 was established, it did not really anticipate single-family detached development. It was anticipating residential uses in a much more urban format, more akin to what you would find in our station area. So in talking with Mr. Beatty last week, he and I both agree that if we're to move forward with residential on this property, we would establish a new zoning district for this 8.67 acre parcel. We talked about other options with extending other planned development districts to include that. There's hair all over that as well. So we feel that the cleanest process would be to establish a new planned development district. We would likely start with the Kensington neighborhood to the north as kind of our starting point with zoning regulations, and then whittle away what we don't need to make sure we come up with good solid standards that would allow for the development of this tract. So, I would anticipate as we move forward, we have to obviously amend the development agreement. We may have to amend PD 99. I need to get with the attorneys on that to have some additional conversation, but ideally we would establish new zoning for this property as well. So that's what I'm anticipating moving forward, and as it relates to this property.
Okay, Ms. Ferguson, my point is, because obviously it sounds like there's a number of additional meetings that will be needed.
That's correct.
I just want to make sure, because there's been conversation about making sure that we have a robust outreach to the residents to make sure we hear back from them. And it sounds like through this process that you're going to be notifying quite a bit of that community that, hey, all these changes are going to be occurring. We want to hear from you in front of P&Z, in front of the city council, et cetera, so they're going to have a chance to voice their opinions about this change, correct?
That is correct. Because it is a zoning change, there is a public hearing process associated with it. So depending upon how it all lays out, it could be that only property owners within 200 feet of this 8-acre tract are notified. However, anybody beyond that would be allowed to come and address the Planning and Zoning Commission and the council. So I would anticipate with our connections in the neighborhood, we would work on facilitating getting information out to them so that they are very mindful and aware of what's transpiring, should they have any questions and want to participate in that process.
Okay. Yeah, I guess if it is possible, and I don't know whether it is or not, but just ensuring that maybe the notification letters go beyond the 200 feet and encompass every home that is to the southwest of Valley View and Luna. Just everything in that kind of corridor, that's all those neighborhoods.
If that's the council direction, that's certainly something we could accommodate.
I mean, we can expand the notification. Typically, what we do on situations like that is we would do a courtesy notice to folks that are outside the 200-foot area. So we can do that. Where we have to be mindful is if we start getting letters in opposition of folks that own property within the 200-foot boundary. But we can manage through that process.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to see that cover a bigger area so that a majority of the homeowners over there are able to speak to this if they choose to. Does anyone have any problem with that? No? Okay. Any other comments at this time? If not, I think we have direction forward.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A6, discuss future agenda items. Councilmember Rotana. Councilmember Norwood.
Yeah, I don't know how to phrase this correctly, but, we've had all these letters from the west side about their concerns about increased crime. I've had residents contact me in District 3 about car break-ins and storage shed break-ins and that kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of concern about, we've seen the memo from Chief Hale about, COVIDs and more people roaming around. I'd just like to get an update on the, if there's anything we can positively do, to support our policing efforts to decrease these petty crimes that are a concern to the residents. We had blow-up things stolen in my neighborhood, and it's just, petty crime, but I'd like to see how we're getting a handle on that and what the police department's doing, and if there are any resources or any extra equipment that we could apply to that. That's a long way to say I'd like Chief Hale to come talk to us.
All right. Councilmember Lynn.
I really didn't want to bring this up here today, but I'm going to. I would like to see the area, the Inwood Alpha corner, be cleaned up. There's debris everywhere. Trees are overgrown, blocking signage. I've reached out to the developer via phone and email numerous times and have not received any return phone call or communication from the developer. So clearly he's not interested in speaking with me, but we need to address that. It looks terrible over there. So hopefully the appropriate folks can get on that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Baumgartner.
Nothing at this time.
Councilmember Driscoll.
No, just like to remind council of the issue I brought up. I don't know, one of the previous meetings. I'd like an update, and I know that'd be an executive session on our infrastructure and cybersecurity and the safety of it.
Okay. Yes, it's scheduled for the next meeting, so we'll talk about it later. Okay. The only thing I potentially, want to discuss doesn't need to be immediate because I think there's going to be some extra meetings and discussions around it with more stakeholders. But I would definitely like to look at the future of multifamily development in the city of Farmers Branch and how we add an affordability component that addresses affordable housing within some of these units, whether it's 5%, 10%, 20%, and figuring out a way that it works not only with the developers, but with the city as well to accomplish some of those goals, because I think integrated housing on that front is something that's definitely needed, needs to be addressed, especially as we grow out and add density in some of our areas of interest. I know that we're going to need some of those residents in the area, and it'll be beneficial not only to them, but to the city. So Nothing for today, but as we move forward, something to bring up. Seeing that we're done with that, go ahead and read in executive session, and then we can go upstairs and handle that. Council may convene into a closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.074, personnel deliberation. Consider the City Code of Ethics complaint filed against Terry Lynn, Councilmember District 4, the city, and the city attorney written report concerning the complaint. And council may convene into a closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.071, consultation with city attorney regarding City Code of Ethics complaint filed against Terry Lynn, City Council Member District 4. We will recess. The time is 4:20 p.m.